The impudence, the audacity, the unmitigated gall of those Knuckleheads of Liberty podcasters, daring to voice opinions outside the mainstream of accepted thought. Listen if you dare. It's angry, it's funny, it's even sometimes sad, but it's always based on freedom and justice, as you will see. Here's our host, Jason McPhee.
Welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. We are coming at you on January 26, 2022. So just a little bit more than a year into the Biden administration. And, wow, things are just always kind of a crazy wreck going on here. But before we get into the show, let me introduce you to our panel. In our upper left-hand corner, we have Leon, the word Brathwaite. Last word in Liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. And upper right-hand corner, we have Tim Everett, our screaming eagle of freedom. He is a pilot in the state of California. And my name is Jason McPhee, and I'll be your host today. So today's show, despite all the craziness going around with everything Biden, and believe me, we'll get more into that in the next show. This week is actually school choice week in the United States. So I thought that might be a kind of a good topic for us to focus on, just because that's such an important topic for liberty-minded people. And so, and let me see if we can bring up the webpage on that. So they actually have a webpage out there, and you can go there and find out more about what's going on with school choice in your area of the country. So it's just a resource that might be worth taking a look at if you happen to be interested in the subject. But as far as the topics go, so this is, we've been kind of in a weird place with COVID, and it's caused a lot of people to start second guessing how school is delivered to them. Lots of people just normally expect that the government is going to deliver education. That's sort of the way it was for most people when they were kids, and that's sort of what most people expect it'll be for their kids, unless they're rich or you happen to be really religious and are really into Catholic schools. Most other kids in this, vast majority of kids go through the government public education. And so this is kind of a big deal, because if you're a liberty-minded person and you think that markets should be handling things right away, every kid is getting this indoctrination that, hey, isn't it great when the government delivers services? I mean, after all, you spend K through 12, 13 plus years, especially if you're heading on into higher education, where a lot of those schools are also government-run schools as well. So this is something where it really sort of biases people against ideas of liberty and markets right off the bat, if this is the way things are. So as liberty-minded people, we understand that, that we've got to be able to make some dent into this and get more kids, I guess, being taught in a more competitive environment. Not only that, too, but aside from the idea that this biases people toward government thinking, we're also just seeing lousy performance out of the public schools, where we're not competing very well in other countries, and we're seeing, against other countries. Lots of people, we talk about having to import people to become engineers and scientists because a lot of people just, aren't cutting the mustard as they come out of the school in this country. Maybe they're choosing lots of liberal arts degrees or other things like that and heading into services. But this is something where it seems like on a global scale, we're not competing very well for all of the money we put into it. And so this is one of the areas where perhaps if we went to markets, we might do a little bit better. And so let me just stick it to you guys at this point. The schools have been, a lot of people have been second guessing this during COVID, watching people shut their kids out of schools and throwing them into haphazard programs and having cafeteria workers and bus drivers teach in schools in areas, because of the shortage of teachers who don't want to come into the classroom at this point. What do you guys think about all this? I mean, give me some thoughts on the whole school choice.
Well, I mean, it is quite heartwarming to see that progress is being made and in the nature of school choice and through vouchers or education saving accounts and those sort of things. All those things are great, and I think it's very good to see that West Virginia, you seem to be quite far along in probably getting closer to what we may consider universal school choice, where nearly all kids will eventually be beneficiaries of such an education system, where we really start to make serious progress in getting away from the tyranny of the zip code. But what is going on right now, even though with some of the progress that we are seeing with the school choice, and we did have one person on here from Florida who was talking about some of the things that are going on in Florida. I think he was affiliated with the American Federation for Children. Clearly, there's progress in that direction, but I don't think the progress is enough overall. I think there's a war ongoing against our children, okay? And that war is being waged by the teachers' unions and the education bureaucrats who believe that their power over our children should override all. Look at the condition of the schools right now. I mean, Jason, you just touched on it. It is a national disgrace. And you're right, globally, we are not competitive. I think you look at whether math, whether you look at science, or you look at any one of the other major subject areas, we are ranked 25th, 38th, whatever you want to call it. But the whole problem here that we have an underlying problem here, okay? That the education bureaucrats and the teachers' unions intend to keep the system, this zip code tyranny that is ongoing, intend to keep that system in place for as long as they can. And I'm glad that the pandemic have brought about a little bit of movement in the direction of more liberty and more freedoms for parents in terms of getting their children educated.
Well, I did a little chatting there with the rest of us and couldn't get out of it. I finally figured it out. Anyway, it's the X. How to get out of chat, kind of like how to get out of the public school system. And yeah, I wish I would see a little bit more progress toward this, but hey, we are making some, and of course it's in response to what's gone on last year in 2020 with all the things that happened in public schools, and you know, the kids getting punished even though they were the least likely to develop severe disease and so on, and even to pass it on. But you know, not that they couldn't, but I'm just saying yeah, this over the top response to the liability of children is just was enough to push people toward a private solution to their needs. So anyway, we could get into the reasons behind why the education system is so bad in the United States, and Leon brought it up. Yeah, in comparison to other countries, many other countries. And we could talk about that, but I think it's heartwarming at least to see this push toward private solutions.
And you know, at the root of all of this, you know, last week in a different context, I said that anywhere life, liberty, or the pursuit of happiness, anywhere we see violations of those principles, we should never permit it. And this education system, this tyranny of the zip code, is clearly interfering with the pursuit of happiness, which is really and truly the pursuit of the highest potential of all human beings. This zip code tyranny is interfering with the pursuit of happiness of our children. Never permitted. So we talk about this and do something fast, really and truly.
Yeah, well, you know, and another, I guess, item about this too is, you know, the, you know, how this is being treated in the in the courts and everything else. I mean, one of the big issues we have is that there's an awful lot of school districts. They essentially put up roadblocks to keep people from being able to take those funds and have them track the kid instead of just being tied to the district. So essentially, if you are paying taxes and your kid is going to school, if you choose to go to a religious school or a private school in a lot of districts, not all of them, but quite a few, the money doesn't actually track your kid. You literally just lose it. I mean, it's gone to the system, and you don't get it back, and so you wind up having to just spend out of pocket to go to your to have school choice, which means that it's only people who are really, really motivated for school choice, like maybe for religious reasons, or people who just have a lot of money. And for you see this constantly with Democrat politicians, with all the wealth that a lot of them have, and yet the lip service they give as well to public school, then they turn around and send their kids to private schools. We see with California's Governor Gavin Newsom. During the lockdowns, we was perfectly comfortable having the kids stay home, but of course he sent his kids to private school, and we see this happen constantly. And certainly the Obamas also gave a lot of lip service to public school, and their kids went to private school, and just on and on and on down the line. So clearly this doesn't seem to be the first choice for those people who have choice. Exactly. Government monopoly on public schools. But that's why it's really critical, I guess, we get any kind of legislative or court help that we can get. And so in the case of the Supreme Court has actually been pretty active recently on a lot of this. And so recently there's been some cases. Let me see if we can get that up on the. So we have. So here in Reason has an article that talks about a couple of recent Supreme Court cases, and one of them was Espinoza versus Montana Department of Revenue, and that was back in 2020. And so in that particular case, the court said you can't not disqualify some private schools solely because they are religious when there are state subsidies that parents can use to send their kids to private schools. So that certainly was something that allowed for a little bit more of a wide net on private schools. And then there was also currently a case going on, Carson versus Macon. And that's also a similar type of case. It says Maine's tuition assistance program apparently ran afoul of the Constitution by excluding private schools that offer sectarian educations. So that's something that I guess they're expecting a decision out in June of this year, apparently. But the point is, this is a court that may give us some favorable rulings to for those areas that want to allow, more private choices in their area and tying the funds to the child, more flexibility in that. So do you guys have any thoughts on this? I know, Leon, you had some insights into the Supreme Court on this.
Yeah, well, just today it was announced that Stephen Breyer, who is a lefty, by the way, is going to retire. So there will be a court, one of the Chief Justice's seat will open up, and Biden is gonna obviously choose somebody from the left. Maybe he might even take Kamala to get rid of her. I guess, I don't know. But it does not. It would not change the ideological makeup of the court, but it would not help the cause of freedom and liberties, especially in terms of our education in terms of the education system. But we have had a favorable ruling from the court on with that case you spoke about, Jason. That case came out of Montana. The second case that they're dealing with right now is the Carson case. That one is out of Maine. And they're expecting, based upon the ideological makeup of the court, that we might get a favorable ruling there also. And I really hope we do. But the point is, though, every time you turn around, you see these education bureaucrats and the teachers' unions putting up roadblocks to stop parents, from having the freedom to choose about in terms of their children's education. And I think we have to keep up this fight that eventually we'll have something very close to universal school choice and finally defeat the tyranny of the zip code. I really hope that we push in that direction.
That hum in the background from me is bugging me. But anyway, the thing I'm wondering is, gee whiz, if so they take tax money from us, so they take money from us, let's say, and they're going to send our kids to public school, or they can take some money from us and then give some of it back, and now we can use that to go to private school. So, I mean, this is what maybe everybody would like. Well, why can't we apply that same principle to using tax money to wage war in Middle Eastern countries, for example, or any other thing that we don't like? So let's say, hey, I don't want to participate in this global war on terror. So I want my tax money back that you spent for those brand new F-18s, for example, and all that ammunition for those M16 rifles and stuff. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether this is something to really stand behind, or if it's opening up a can of worms that has no end. I don't know. I'm not saying well, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't think it's quite the can of worms you're thinking, because the people who are for school choice, they're not saying that the money has to come back to them. They're simply saying that the money can be applied for the education towards somebody delivering it other than government. So you're still paying the money to government for the child to be educated, whether it's your child or somebody else's child. But the idea is that why does it have to be the government that's delivering the education?
Delivering, exactly.
That's the real question. I mean, but certainly some people will see it exactly the way you're talking about too, where why can't I just have the money back to choose what I want to do for anything? But in this case, it's not necessarily that a lot of people, and there are some libertarians who would absolutely say, hey, the government shouldn't even be funding
for sure,
funding education. But at least for a lot of people that are okay with at least there being a funding program for all kids to ensure that all kids get an education. Then one big point, and Milton Friedman made this point, just because we have a government-funded education doesn't mean government has to deliver the education.
Exactly.
So we could have two different arguments.
And it's quite a misnomer to say government funded. It's not government funded. It's taxpayer funded.
Yeah.
Okay. Everything is taxpayer funded. Now, I accept your point, Tim, that we were trying to pick and choose so what we like and don't like and those sort of things and that kind of stuff. But I think Jason's point is more relevant here in the sense that taxpayer funded versus privately delivered. And I don't see if there's any contradiction in terms of our own libertarian beliefs in where it's taxpayer funded but delivered in the private markets. I don't see a problem with that, quite frankly.
It would be almost
yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say it would be almost like if the government gives you money for a food stamp, but then says, "Oh, but it can only be used to buy government-produced food."
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I think the food would be so expensive at that point. You wouldn't
and scarce.
It will be expensive and substandard. You could guarantee that.
Exactly.
Well, okay. There you go. I don't know.
No, but Tim, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm in favor of the whole idea. Believe me, being able to use the money for whatever you want it for, or to go to the public school if you want, I guess. But yeah, I'm all in favor of that. I'm just saying I wonder if this applies to other things is all.
Yeah. But one of the roadblocks that is constantly placed in the way of getting towards that universal school choice, right? The vouchers and all that stuff. One of the big roadblocks they always put up is this concept of separation of church and state, which I totally agree that we should always have that in our laws or in our constitution, that the church and state should be always be separated. But I do not understand. I never understand why this applies in this whole school choice argument, because taxpayers pay the money to the government, and then the government is returning that money to taxpayers, and taxpayers are making the choice as to where they're going to go spend that money. It's not the government determining that you should go to a public school, you should go to a religious school. It's the taxpayer making that choice. So I never understand this argument that there must, so that the government cannot fund, and this is part of the argument in the case before the court right now. The government cannot fund vouchers that will end up in a religious school, because I don't understand that when it's the taxpayers making the choice, not the government. But I guess they will resolve it, I hope.
Guys, I'm going to leave and try to fix my issues. I'm going to have to completely shut everything down and come back. I'm sorry, but I'll be right back as soon as I can.
Okay.
This is I've got some technical issues. I'll be right back.
We'll catch you during the Knucklehead Noise Patrol, Tim. But before we get to Knucklehead Noise Patrol, let me just go on about a few more things. So personally, I don't care whether or not, which type of school really gets the money in the end. I think the major issue is that we have competition, right? And I mean, if you truly believe markets work, then you're going to realize that parents are going to be looking for the best products. And the best way to judge that in the long run is how alumni are doing. And so alumni who are coming out of good programs are going to wind up getting more parents say, hey, I want my kid to have the success of that kid down the street. Because, man, that kid's a doctor today. I want him to go to school where that kid went to school, or whatever, the goal is. And so, this concern that some people have, that a lot of lefty people or others, or in some cases, people on the right, that they're upset that the wrong religious school might get the money. Maybe it's a, Islamic school or something else. I really don't care. I mean, the bottom line is, let the market have competition. Let's see which schools put out the best products, and let the kids come out, and and in the end, the worst schools will disappear.
Indeed.
I'll sit in for Tim for a second. And I want to say, I don't care about the money or anything. I care about the individual child. I don't care about the market. I don't care about the public schools. I don't care about private schools. I care about the individual child. And as someone who didn't fit into the public school system, and who had children who had anxiety disorders and didn't fit into that public school system, choice, whether it's, a public school or what's that? Rotisserie school, like they're going to rotisserie children. Montessori school, yeah, whichever.
Montessori, yeah.
Rotisserie school. Yeah, we're not eating children over here, but by the way, guys, whichever best for the child, and that's actually what should be important, and that's what we have completely lost in our current system.
And by the way, for those of you who are listening online, this is the voice of our invisible hand, James Just, who's jumped in to join us on the program for a second. So, But I mean, all of us have had kids in the school system at some point. And I think, it can be appalling when you see your kid is trapped in a space where maybe the teacher isn't so great, or maybe they're being force-fed something, and you just... it's like, what are you going to do? I mean, you can get upset, and maybe you can try and change districts or something else, but you're still kind of stuck to the same system and the luck of the draw, versus
exactly
really having a broad range of choice like you might have in a normal market situation.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well,
and you're so right. Choice. We have to have choice. We have choice. We have children the right to put happiness.
Yeah, I think we're losing you a little bit, Leon, but let's get into the Knucklehead Noise Patrol at this point. So this is one that's not really related to schools, but it is related to our egotistical central planning leaders who always think they know best what's best for the sheep. And in this case, we're going outside the country for our Knucklehead this week, and that is for French President Macron. I'm not sure what his first name is, but
Emmanuel.
Okay, Manuel Macron. And in fact, we have a story here on it. So let me just jump to the story. And in that story, Macron, apparently he wants to really stick it to the people who are unvaccinated, as a lot of our big central planning leaders want to do. And so he, in a January 4th interview with the paper Le Parisien, he said, "I really want to piss them off, and we'll carry on doing this to the end." And he's referring to the unvaccinated, and he's referring to all kinds of rules in what he's allowing unvaccinated people to do in France. And I just can't even imagine the arrogance. You know, we saw Hillary Clinton when she was running against Trump, and she referred to half of the voting population as
deplorables.
Yeah, deplorables, exactly. And now here you see this leader essentially saying, "Hey, I'm going to piss some of these guys off, and I'm glad to do it." So I don't know. What do you guys have to think about this? This seems pretty crazy.
You notice what is happening here? It's the demonization of the unvaccinated. It's the same thing that's happening here in the United States. You see, it does not matter where we are geographically. Whenever you have power-hungry people in charge, that power is so addictive, they never want to give it up. Now, even in France now, they want to force people to be vaccinated. We have spoken about what's going on in Australia, and we know very well what's going on here in the United States. You want to demonize the unvaccinated, and you want to force people to do things that they don't want to do. And this is central planning at its worst. It really is a violation of all our rights and our liberties. God help us.
Yep. Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You're coming in about a second behind what your lips are moving, and then I hear it. What's coming out of them? Yeah, I don't know. This guy's apparently got the ire of his fellow politicians in France. Well, that's a good thing. I mean, it would be really disconcerting if everybody was cheering this guy on, right? With Omicron, in my opinion, the beginning of the end of this pandemic coming along and changing the whole story. This whole vaccine stuff is just gonna slowly, I guess, they don't like to give it up, but slowly end, and the sooner the better. So hopefully that's what'll happen.
Well, whether it pisses off our listeners or not, we're out of time. So unfortunately, we'll have to leave it there, but we'll catch you next week. And until then, stay free.